What's up, everyone? This is Pastor Adam coming out at you. I hope all of you have been enjoying and have been having a good Memorial Day weekend. And I hope you all had time to rest and spend time with your family. I certainly had time to chill out a bit, which is a rarity for me. And I'm definitely coming at you a little bit late on this Monday to upload this podcast, and I apologize for that. But I did have a nice time over the weekend with my family. I went to the movies with my father and my brother-in-law. We had a nice time, and my brother-in-law got nachos, which I thought was gross. Movie theater food usually isn't my favorite, and it's usually overpriced. But my brother-in-law was hungry, and so we were all in the back of the theater, and my brother-in-law, he's in the back using his phone flashlight to shine on the nachos so he could see them while he ate them. And I turned to him, I think you should turn that off. People might say something. But we had a good time. And I'm excited now to get back into our 1 John study. Of course, last week I finished my study in the Hall of Faith at my church. And I hope all of you enjoyed the Hall of Faith study, which I posted on this podcast each week over the past number of weeks. It was a 5-week study, and we'll be taking a break from the Tuesday night study at my church for the month of June, but then we'll be getting back into things in July, so stay tuned on that, and I still need to decide exactly what I'll be covering. I gotta pray about it and brainstorm it. But today, we're picking things up in 1 John chapter 3. And I just need to apologize right now. I'm in a different setting currently recording this podcast than I usually am in. So you might hear a little bit of an echo. I know the audio might sound a little bit different than usual every Monday. So I apologize for that. Things should be back to normal, hopefully, next week. It depends. I'll listen to the audio, see what I could do, see if there's anything. But anyhow, we will be picking it up back in 1 John chapter 3 today. And we'll be picking it up in verse 11, where John expands upon the necessity for the child of God to walk in love. This is something that he speaks of often in his first epistle. But where we left off last week, John said in verse 10, "This is how we know who the children of God are and who the children of the devil are. Anyone who does not do what is right is not God's child, nor is anyone who does not love their brother and sister." It appears evident that John regards those who are not born of Christ as children of the devil. And the devil indeed has many children who are unwittingly being used by him. They are his pawns, his servants of darkness. The scary thing is most who are children of the devil don't know that they are. Most who are children of the devil don't know that they're being used by the devil. But you have non-believers everywhere who are actually being used by Satan to lead others astray. They may not even know it themselves. But Satan's children are doing the devil's work, living out ungodly lifestyles that are influencing others and leading others astray. It's this one continuous cycle you see. But a big sign as to whether or not someone is a believer is that of their character. Does their character demonstrate that of a changed, Holy Spirit-filled life? And one big indicator of this is, or one of the big signs that a person has been touched with the love of Christ, as if they in turn are demonstrating the same love towards other people in their everyday life. We've all met self-centered people, and these can be some of the nastiest people you come in contact with. People who are self-centered lovers of themselves. All of the love that they expend is on themselves and nobody else. They use up all they have of love on themselves, and so all they really have to give in return at that point is hate. Cruel, nasty hate. That's all that Cain had to provide for his brother. Hate. Picking it up in verse 11. For this is the message you heard from the beginning. We should love one another. Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brother's were righteous. It is interesting how we read here that Cain murdered his brother because he saw that his brother's actions were righteous before God. Indeed, we read in the Genesis account that in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Now, the text does not tell us exactly why Abel's offering was considered to be more acceptable than that of Cain's. But we do have some clues here. I touched on this a little bit when I covered Abel in the Hall of Faith study. It says here that he brought the fat portions of the firstborn of his flock. In the ancient Near East, it was known that bringing that of the firstborn, or the first of anything, would have been a sign of showing a deity the utmost honor. It was common. It was a common thing in worship. And then also even bringing that of the fat portions. This was considered to be a special portion of the sacrifice in the ancient Near East that was to be dedicated to a deity. Abel certainly brought and presented his best to God. His actions certainly were a demonstration of bringing your best efforts to the Lord. And thus we see that Abel's heart condition was in the right place. By contrast, it seems that Cain did not exemplify this same strong effort. He apparently did not present his best to God. And so we see how such reflected that of his inner heart condition. You will know people for who they are, by the fruits that they show for over time in their lives and in their Christian walk. Where is a person's heart? Well, if you want to know, see what type of fruit their heart has been producing. But if we read on, if you continue on in the Genesis account, you read here that Cain killed his brother. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, Let's go out to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is your brother Abel? I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's keeper? The Lord said to him, What have you done? Listen up. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now remember, we read here in 1 John that Cain killed his brother Abel because Abel's actions were righteous. Cain saw that the Lord had favor upon his brother, and he saw that the reason why was because his brother had a better heart than him. There are some people who will hate you, believe it or not, because of your good heart. Maybe you've experienced this. You probably have at some point in your life. Someone was mistreating you, someone wasn't nice to you, but you could even tell that the reason why they weren't kind to you was simply because you were a really nice person and everybody liked you. Some people actually have hatred for those who they see are better people than they are. If you read about narcissism, you'll see this a lot. How those who are diagnosed with NPD, narcissist personality disorder, they actually deep down, many of them, they know that something within them is wrong, is off. They know that there's a missing piece within them, and when they see other people in their lives who are genuine, who can actually feel love for others, they build up resentment towards that person. Sometimes people make excuses for why they're nasty. And they make up reasonings in their minds for why they aren't kind and friendly, like other people that they see. Oh, well, the reason why she's really loving and kind and all is because she grew up in a privileged household. She grew up with a silver spoon in her mouth. That's why she's so nice or loving or kind. Or he's a nice man, and okay, yeah, he's a good Christian and all, but that's only because he grew up in a stable household. He didn't have to go through the things that I went through, when I grew up. He didn't go to the school of hard knocks, like me. He wasn't beaten by his father like I was. And so, he might be a nice person and all, but, in reality, he's just naive to how life really is for some people, And these types of people, these narcissistic people, they actually develop a mindset to where they think that they are actually superior to those who are kind and loving people. They think that they know more about life and the harshness or reality of life or whatever, and so these narcissistic people actually develop this type of thinking, where they perceive kind and loving people to be nothing but naive idiots. Now, I've met people like this before, even in the church. People who disregarded anything that the Bible said, and instead they actually developed their own philosophy about life. And of course, the narcissist thinks that they're right about everything. And all these happy people around them, they're the stupid ones, But the reality we know is that the narcissist is in fact the one who's foolish. Especially if they're in the church exemplifying that type of attitude. They're listening to the truth every Sunday morning, but they're not applying it to their own life. Narcissism is in direct contrary to the type of character the follower of Christ is to demonstrate. For narcissism only demonstrates that one is not a child of God, but rather a child of the devil. Now, of course, again, we're all guilty. All of us are guilty of narcissism from time to time. All of us have moments where we become self-centered. It's in our flesh. And so we do struggle sometimes. But that's not what I'm talking about necessarily here. I'm talking about a life defined by such narcissistic characteristics. That's a real red flag right there. At least if one claims to be a child of God. But in the case of that Cain, John makes it clear. He belonged to that evil one, that of Satan. Now, touching on that of hatred, John finds an interesting segue here, because he continues with elaborating on how believers will often be a target for hatred. We are not to show hatred towards others, because hatred is a quality of the world, and hatred is the type of behavior that the world will often demonstrate towards other believers. Verse 13, do not be surprised, my brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. Hatred, you see, is a behavioral characteristic of people in the world. That's why he's inserting this here in the middle of his talk, on how believers should avoid hatred. But the world will indeed hate on believers. Jesus said, if the world hates you, know that it hated me first. The world hated Jesus. And to be frank, the world still hates Jesus. Most people in public or anywhere, you're interacting with people, non-believers, if you bring up the subject of religion or that of God and so forth, most of the time a person will be inclined. They might be inclined to actually listen to you. I've seen this many a times before. People will be inclined to hear what you have to say if you start talking about finding God. Or, let me tell you about my spiritual journey, and so forth. But if you mention that of Jesus Christ, people immediately shut their ears. That is at least often what happens. Because there is something about the name of Jesus that bothers people. It's almost as if deep down inside people know that Jesus is indeed God. They know that the gospel is indeed truth. But still, they just can't handle that truth. They don't want to accept it. Jesus, people hated him because they hated his message. They hated his mission. The population that Jesus ministered to in the first century, they thought that he was going to immediately come in and overtake the Roman Empire and just, set up shop upon Mount Zion. But when they realized that such was not the mission of Jesus, at least at his first coming, they weren't happy about that at all. When they heard that Jesus first had to humble himself to that of a suffering servant, then he told his followers, go and do likewise, that really got under a lot of people's skin. Because that went against the appeal of the messianic figure, one who would come and set up shop and rule and reign. And you see all of his followers would then be appointed to rulership positions as he ruled upon Zion. And that whole concept, all of that was very appealing, you see. This is why in the Gospels the disciples were arguing who will be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. They thought that Jesus was going to set up his kingdom immediately and appoint them as his loyal rulers, give them important positions in his kingdom. But soon they learned this wouldn't be the case, because humility always comes before exaltation. This is why so many people in this world, they fail to grasp this. Philippians 2, 5 through 11. Paul writes, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death upon a cross. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place, and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven, on earth, under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. You see, Jesus wasn't going to come down in the form of a man for people to immediately praise him and cry out to him. His mindset was first upon that of God's mission for him. It needs to be the same for us. We need to keep our eyes on God's kingdom purpose for us rather than what we want for us. And Jesus indeed did this. And that is why God exalted him to the highest place. This is why we indeed read in James, humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up. But that message of humility that Christ brought to the world, that didn't jive with the world's narcissistic tendencies. And thus, the world hated Jesus. And Christians who are representatives, who are spokespersons of that message, people will hate as well. The world doesn't want to admit that there is a need for a Savior, that there is a need to humble themselves before the Lord, before God's throne. And so the world hates us. Do not be surprised, my brothers and sisters, if the world hates you. He again includes this little insertion to stress the fact that hatred is completely wrong. It goes completely against God's will for his children. And it is nothing but worldly behavior. In fact, hatred is all the world has to offer us. So he gets back on track in verses 14 through 15. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love each other. Anyone who does not love remains in death. Anyone who hates a brother or sister is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life residing in him. A heart characterized by hate. Some people's hearts are indeed characterized by hate. Some people are even driven by hate. I'm going to dedicate my life to this career or this or that, making a lot of money because I want to prove people wrong, certain people in my life, my father, my mother, my siblings. I want to, my brother, I want to prove him wrong because, he always thought growing up that he would, be better than me. I'll show him. You have hatred for your brother, for your sibling. Some people are actually driven, their entire life's goals are driven by hate that they have for other people. But we need to be driven by love, Christ's love. John is certainly echoing the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount here. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said to people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.' But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." And when Jesus says anger here, note that he's not talking about normal reactions to certain things or righteous anger, or not all anger is sinful in and of itself, believe it or not, but rather unwarranted bitterness towards another person. That's what he's referring to. So John continues, "This is how we know what love is. Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth." Because you see, talk is cheap. It was true back then, it's the same today. God's not looking for talk. He's looking for action. He's looking for both, all right? But he wants us to go ahead and he wants us to work out our salvation. He wants us to see that work, that fruit in our lives. And so we'll leave it there today. And we will finish up 1 John chapter 3 next week. And so I hope again that all of you are having just a wonderful, I hope that the weekend's over at this point. Even the 3-day weekend's over. I'm going to be uploading this to you at the end of Memorial Day. But I hope that all of you did indeed have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. I hope that all of you have a good week, the rest of the week. It's time to go back to work tomorrow, isn't it? And so I encourage all of you. I hope all of you are having just a wonderful time. And God bless you. Check out my website, westcoastbibleteacher.com. Find me on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook even. Also check out and subscribe to my YouTube channel, West Coast Bible Teacher. And I hope that all of you have a wonderful week in the Lord.